So my approach to this is that we've gotten into this trouble because government is too big and spends too much. So my first year, I want to cut actual cuts of $1 trillion the first year. In the House tomorrow, we'll be voting on a bill to try to stop the national debt by going up another $1.2 trillion. But y'all remember, I'm sure, last summer when we were at an impasse, we couldn't get the debt limit raised, and so they said, well, we'll have a temporary raise, but we're going to have a super committee. If we don't do anything, the super committee has to do it. If they don't do something, automatically we're going to cut $1.2 trillion out of the budget. And so that happened. The super committee was a super mess, and it didn't work. So the cuts are sort of in place, but there's tremendous resistance, so I don't predict they'll come. But they're not cuts. They're tinkering around with proposed increases. They have these automatic increases 10 years out. And the cuts that they claim there are cuts don't start until the year 2013. And they're talking about $1 trillion over 10 years. That's $100 billion a year. Our national debt is going up over $100 billion a month. And they think that is a solution. So we have to know that cutting is necessary. We have to change the environment to invite our businesses back, change the tax climate, change the financial system. The dollar standard has to be changed. And this has to happen because we have to get productive again. But in cutting, what I do is I cut where I think we should cut and not harm the people who have become so dependent on government. Yes, there may be a day we can, if we work hard, we can work our way out of this and get less government, less people dependent on government. But today, what I would propose, I would cut so much of this money that we're spending overseas. Why are we spending so much overseas? If we're going to spend that money, it ought to be spent back here at home, is what I think. Yeah! I would cut five departments, starting with the Department of Education. Yeah! Go back a few years and use baseline budgeting, but these would be actual cuts. Now, my concern is that the people I know in Washington, I don't think they have the vaguest idea how serious it is. The people outside Washington, I'm sure you have a better understanding of the concern for this type of government we have. But if they were concerned, if they understood how serious this crisis is, to me, it's the biggest economic crisis in the history of the world because it's been global. It's global, and it's been there's been fiat currencies, paper currencies, and like that over the centuries. It's usually country by country, but this time it's the whole world is engulfed, and it's all based on the dollar as being the reserve. So everybody's in this together, and when they decide to leave the dollar, then there's going to be a crisis. So this is why people who say, oh no, we can't cut anything, if we don't start doing it, everybody will suffer because the collapse of a currency is very, very serious. And then when I think about, I wonder why they're having all these laws about arresting American citizens by the military, it really worries me a bit. Because what we need to do is correct this so we don't get violence in the streets. People who don't have an understanding or see that some people are thriving, they're going to be tempted to go into violence. Other countries are already starting to do it. So many of those countries that have had revolts recently, usually it's the cost of food. It's inflation. And people see this and they strike out. And we're not immune to that. So this is why this is so important that we understand what the government's role should be and why it's important to look at the money system. But it's also important that we look at our national defense system and what we're doing overseas. There are very few things that are explicit in the Constitution. One is strong national defense. The federal government and the president has a lot of responsibility to defend this country. But I have some very good news for you. I've been in the military. I have a good feel for what's involved in the military. And let me tell you, this country can be defended. There is nobody that's going to attack us. Our military would repel any military threat whatsoever. And we don't have to worry about it. And we all know that we take an oath to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so we should be concerned about our domestic threat as well. But the big question is how do you get a strong national defense when some people argue that the more money you spend in the military, the stronger our defense is? So I don't buy into this. I mean, just because you spend more money, and the example I used last night in the debate was, they were arguing, the commentator was arguing with me. He says, well, you want to cut defense? No, I don't want to cut defense, I want to cut military. And he couldn't quite understand what I was talking about. So I said, look, if we spend $1 billion building an embassy in Baghdad, as big as the Vatican, how does that help our national defense? That doesn't help us whatsoever. When I was in the Air Force, I did spend a little bit of time on the Pakistani-Afghanistan border, right at the Khyber Pass. And it is rugged territory, believe me. And they really can't, you're not going to have a fence line to know where that boundary is, because it's sort of a no man's land is where it was. They told me that it was like that then, that it's been like that for hundreds of years. It's going to be like that for a long time. But we're over there fighting and dying and spending all this money figuring out these borders and what to do and what kind of governments they should have. I think we should worry more about our own borders here in this country and not